Thank you so much for joining us in this interview series at Women Leading in Crisis and Conflict. I wanted to start really just to set this up. Obviously, the world is a tumultuous place, and this past year we've all been consumed with COVID and all of the things that have come out of that. But obviously, there's been a crisis in Belarus. So if you could just briefly give us a sense of what's going on there, given all of the things that have happened over the past bit of time, including the dramatic hijacking, the trials that are going on, just so that the people who are listening to this have a snapshot of what's going on in Belarus.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for opportunity to speak here on behalf of not only Belarusian women, but on behalf of all Belarusian people. And, on 9th of August 2020, we had presidential election in Belarus, and President Lukashenko, who was the ruler of our country for 26 years, lost this election. But he didn't want to give his power, and when people peacefully raised against fraudulent elections, against stolen votes, he made hell in Belarus. During 3 days after elections, thousands of people had been detained from peacefully demonstrations and were harshly beaten and tortured in jails. And after this, whole nation stood up against violence, against tortures in Belarus, and of course against fraudulent elections. And since then, violence from the regime is increasing day to day. And it was and it is such a huge level of violence. But despite of this, people are not giving up. For a couple of months after fraudulent elections, there were huge peaceful demonstrations in Belarus where women took the leading role. Now, at this very moment, there are no mass rallies outside, only because of violence, not because people don't want to get out. But women, all the people in Belarus don't feel safe. They can be kidnapped in the streets, in their apartments. They can be put in jail at any moment of their life. So everybody's life is full of stress. And we have very small windows of opportunities in Belarus now to fight. But our fight now moved to more undergroundly level, and people use every inch of these opportunities to struggle. Women are organized. Doctors, students, workers are organized, and they are fighting like a background. And of course, we understand that it's very difficult because of huge repressions, very difficult to fight openly in Belarus. And that's why we called European Union, the USA, to come and support Belarusians. And we are not talking about interfering into internal politics, because it's only up to Belarusians to decide the future of Belarus, but to stand for human rights, to stand against lawlessness, against tortures in our country. And we're really grateful to all the countries that were so vocal about situation in Belarus. And they, after Ryanair flight, this attention to Belarusian questions raised twice, 3 times. And since August, we used all the possible diplomatic ways to appeal to the regime, for them to stop violence, to release political prisoners. By the way, at the moment, it's 500 political prisoners in Belarus. But regime didn't hear. So that's why these sanctions that are imposed by European Union now, maybe it's the only leverage how democratic countries can stand with Belarusians. So together, only with being united inside country and outside country, we believe that our beloved people will be released from prisoners, and we will come out of this crisis. And we see the end of this crisis is new early elections this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know there's been such a strong response from the West, and which you've talked about a little bit. Can you talk about how that response has affected your advocacy for free and fair elections, for a new and better Belarus? Just, you know, how has pressure from the West had an impact?
You know, right after elections, of course, European Union saw this violence, saw tortures, saw lawlessness in Belarus, and from the beginning, democratic countries didn't recognize Lukashenko as legitimate president because they understood, they knew that elections were stolen, and it was very inspiring, and it gave inspiration for Belarusians to understand that we are not alone. All the democratic world is with us, and we felt this support, and we became stronger in our strive for coming to new Belarus, to new democratic Belarus. And very fast 3 packages of sanctions were imposed, and from OSCE, UN, ODIHR, every European Union used every diplomatic way how to communicate to regime, but you know, if regime doesn't want to hear, so they didn't. And that's why European Union, you know, they allowed me to speak with the leaders of the countries on behalf of all the Belarusians. It was very significant for us to have this opportunity to communicate, to tell about Belarus. Because I have to say that before this uprising, almost nobody in European countries and the USA knew maybe where Belarus was. You know, Poland, Lithuania, our neighboring countries, of course, knew, but further to the west, you know, we were like appendix to Russia. Nobody knew what Belarus is. And you know, the whole world was inspired with this peaceful uprising, especially with the fact that women were the face of this revolution. Because I'd say the fact that women were on the forefront, front line of this revolution was a forced measure. Because when our men were detained and tortured in jails, women understood that this is future of our children as well. This is now our task to stand instead of our men, to be on the front line, because we just felt that we have to defend our men. Because, you know, my first step, why I came to this presidential campaign, because only for love to my husband. Then, of course, it became more general. You know, I stood in one row with other Belarusians, you know, and but as a woman, I always was wife and mother. But when my husband was detained, I didn't have, you know, I wanted to show him that what is important to you is important to me. And we had like three women that also had to stand instead of the men, because one more was detained who participated in election campaign. One person has had to flee the country because of repressions. So there were 3 women that found strength in ourselves to go against regime. And other women, maybe we were example for other women, I don't know, but you know, it was something unreal.
And I think it's so compelling, that story, because it really speaks about the role of women, and also the issue of how to ensure that there's a kind of a pressure, but in a nonviolent way. And I wonder if you can talk about how you've all been able to maintain this commitment to nonviolence in the face of repression and in the face of the tactics that you face, because I think that's a really compelling story.
You know, I'm a woman. I'm against any violence at all. So I would like this revolution to be peaceful, because we don't want any victims. This is regime that commit all these crimes. We don't want to decrease to the level of the regime. We want to be higher. We want to be, we want to be light. We want to be white side of this fight. They are black and we are white, because we, it's in women nature that we are peaceful. We want everything to be solved peacefully. Like I treat people of Belarus as children. Mother will never harm children. And mother will never sacrifice with their children. So I really don't want to be our Belarusians to be like those who are supporting regime. We want to prove to the world that it's possible to solve the problems in civilized and peaceful way.
And I think that goes to, just maybe you can talk a little bit about, obviously this is a really, difficult situation in terms, again, of the repression, but you all stepping forward in sort of in place of or as standard bearers for your husbands and other, and party members who are running for office. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how being a woman has influenced any of that a little bit more. I think people would be interested. You're a very unlikely political figure, and I think that's part of what's compelling to people is, in fact, that you haven't sort of been in politics your whole life. So if you could just talk a little bit about your sort of personal journey and how that has, how being a woman has influenced your leadership style.
For last 10 years, I was upbringing my children. My husband was working, but it wasn't because I didn't want to work or I didn't have ambitions. I just have a child with special needs and I have to rehabilitate him. So that's why I was only wife and mother. And, propaganda always uses this fact. Who is she? She's just wife. She didn't work, but, I have response to it. And as I already said, my first step was only to love to my husband, because we are family, we are responsible for each other, and I knew how it's important for him was to fight against the regime, to tell the truth to people what's going on in Belarus. And I think that people accepted this fact. So they didn't look at me as a politician from the beginning. They looked at me as on a person, the same as they are. People are so tired of all those nomenclatura politicians. They were, they took themselves as gods. They are untouchable. And I was usual person, and I couldn't speak these diplomatic speeches. I'm very bad at speeches, but I talk to people from my heart. I appeal to grandfathers, grandmothers. You also want your grandchildren to live in a wonderful country. We want our country to be prosperous. Don't think that after Lukashenko there is no future. There will be better future. I just talk to them as to my friends. And people, it was so new for people that person from the scene is talking to them as with equal. And I was like all of them. And that's why people believed in me. They believed me because I believed them. And when two other women, Maria Kolesnikova and Veronika Tsipkala, they also had to step instead of their men, and we became trio that united all the people. Because of course some part of country was wanted to vote for Viktor Babarika, one for Sergei Tikhanovsky, my husband, some part was for Valery Tsipkala, and three women agreed that we are not competing now. We want to bring country to new elections, because the candidates were in prison already. We don't want power. We want just new future for our children. And we agreed in 7 minutes. We met first time, and in 7 minutes we agreed that yes, we want new elections. It's not fight for power at all. And I'm not to be politician in future. I have mandate for only to bring a country to new elections. And I always said, you vote on the election day. I always told people, you don't vote for me as for politician, as for the future ruler, because I don't have this experience of ruling the country. You know, I can be maybe a moral authority for you, but I promise to you that I'm not going to participate in new elections. We have a lot of wonderful, experienced people in Belarus who will participate. I'm here. You're not voting for me as for politician, but you are voting against regime, against dictatorship, against violence. And together, we joined. All the people of Belarus joined and voted for me. And then we try to protect our votes.
Wow, that's 7 minutes. That's the power of women working together for sure. I have just a couple more questions. One, I think people would really be interested. Obviously, you're not in Belarus now, and a lot of people aren't. But how have you been able to kind of keep in touch and motivate people who are still in the country, whether they're in civil society or the business sector? How has that worked? What have you found to be the most effective way to really ensure that you're continually in contact and able to know what's going on the ground in Belarus?
So first of all, I'm in Lithuania now. I'm like in exile, if I can say so, but I'm only 30 kilometers from border. I don't feel I'm in exile. And God bless internet. You know, I'm communicating, I'm in constant dialogue with all the spheres, with people of all the spheres in Belarus. I have everyday calls with doctors, with teachers, workers, pensioners, sportsmen, our revolution is not about Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya and other democratic leaders. It's about people in Belarus. And it's not me who is telling what to do. It's people who are telling me, what should be my decisions. It's like grassroots revolution. And I'm communicating to people. We inspire each other. We understand what the situation inside Belarus. We are sharing how we are threatened, how we are scared, but we can't stop. Because all those people who are already in jail, all those 35,000 people who have been detained since August and were badly injured and tortured, we are responsible for them. We doctors, we workers, we students are responsible for those who sacrificed with their lives, with their freedom and health, just to give us opportunity to fight. And everybody understands this. And that's why we in constant coordination. We are communicating to activists on the ground. We are communicating to volunteers who widespread samizdat. It's newspapers, printed newspapers that show the truth, especially to those people who don't have access to internet, in villages, to old people, to open their eyes, because propaganda works rather well. They show so ugly TV shows about democratic forces, about situation. They said that it's European Union conduct all the revolution. They lost communication with the people. They don't understand that nobody rules this revolution. It's people who are prized. And that's why it's rather easy to communicate to people now. And I use every opportunity. I have, a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings with leaders, with the representatives of democratic countries. But my favorite task is to talk to people on the ground. I so miss my motherhood. I so miss, all Belarusians. And we need to inspire each other, we need to communicate, and we do this. That's why for more than for more than 10 months already. We are still resisting despite of the huge repression level in Belarus.
Well, I want to thank you for your time and obviously for everything that you've done to fight for democratic principles, really for all of us around the world, because what happens in one country has an impact for all of us. I want to give you one last opportunity to just talk about what you think the future should hold for Belarus. I know you've talked about new elections, and beyond that, is there any other hope you have for Belarus that you'd like to share with the viewers, and then we can wrap it up and you can go on and keep talking to other people about the critical situation in your country.
You know, I really believe that Belarus can be a success story, how peacefully we could get rid of the regime. And Belarusians are really wonderful and hardworking people. We want to build new Belarus, prosperous, safe, where our people will have a good level of lives. And for 26 years, we lived in so-called stability that Lukashenko promoted, but we don't want to live in this stability anymore. We want to develop, because the rest of the world of Western countries, you know, stepped far, far away. You know, we began from one point and now we live in stability with low salaries, where our poor pensioners can't allow themselves to go to a cafe or to trip to the seaside. And I really want to people to have you know, dignity, to spend their life wonderful, to have to earn good money, not to think. You know, our pensioners, sorry for prolonging, our pensioners, we usually see this picture in the shops, they choose what to buy, bread or apples, for example. It's such a pity picture. And I really want Belarusians to become a prosperous country where people have a lot of opportunities to develop. And I'm sure that we, knowing how much we suffered for you know, these years, I'm sure that we will able to gain this wonderful country. We are in our fight now, but I believe in Belarusians, I believe in myself, and I believe in democratic countries that will not leave us, that will be stand with Belarusians until our victory, until new elections.
Well, thank you so much again, for everything you're doing and for taking the time to talk with us. You're very inspirational, and it's really been an honor. So thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.